If you're not setting those high standards for yourself, by default, you're going to fall to the level of society's standards where you're not really challenged and everyone's just kind of the same and a bit mediocre. You're not satisfied with where you currently are, but you're not energized and passionate enough to take the action for something, and you just sort of exist in this place of utter dissatisfaction. So welcome to the video, guys. In this one, I'm going to be building upon the last topic, which was essentially about raising your standards, demanding more of yourself, because that's essentially what your soul really wants to express. And in this one, I want to build on that a little bit and speak about some realizations and conclusions I've reached in my own journey, which is that if you really want to achieve any semblance of fulfillment and happiness in this life, then really you've got no choice but to actually follow that. So I want to start by speaking of this concept of karma. Now, when people think of karma, they think of evil deeds being revisited on people if they do something bad or whatever. But karma is a term from yogic science that basically translates to action, and that doesn't just mean physical action, but it also means what you intend, your intention. Now, the goal of many spiritual traditions is to basically become free of all karma. Whether you take a positive action or a negative action, those are still karma, and they basically bind us to this reality. Now, a lot of those traditions speak about this in the sense of kind of ceasing to desire. You know, like there's a term in Buddhism which is desire is suffering. One could translate that to mean that if you have no desire and you don't really want anything, then you would be at peace and you wouldn't suffer. There really are two ways to kind of remove your karma. There is where you just cease to desire and you don't want anything anymore, but that is incredibly difficult for people to do, especially in the Western world, unless you're in some kind of monastery or something and you devote your entire life to it. But the way I personally like to think about this is if the aim is to kind of remove desire, you've got that way where you just stop desiring anything, but also if you achieve those desires and you manage to bring them to fruition, that also ends desire. Now, when you wish to bring about a new reality for yourself or create something, we might be inspired by something and that sort of triggers something within us, and then we start to feed energy to it in the form of thoughts. We start to envision what it would be like to have that thing, and the more and more energy you feed to it, that's what makes it grow, almost like a seed that you've planted. So I've watched a lot of documentaries about creative and successful people in different industries. A lot of them are in a kind of unanimous agreement that there's almost like a storehouse of ideas somewhere in a plane of reality in the universe that we aren't really privy to, but it exists somewhere, and it's like you tap into these ideas and you become inspired by them, and then it's your job to kind of bring them into reality. And a lot of those people have also said as well that when they had an idea and they didn't act on it, then somebody else very soon after created almost the same or something very similar. So that kind of points to the fact that there's almost like this market of creative ideas, and you have to like bid on them with your attention and the energy that you give to them. And if you've been inspired by something, it's not enough just to think about it. You also need to have the capacity to bring it into reality. And I think people can often fool themselves into thinking that because they're inspired and they're excited by something, that it's just magically going to happen. So the number one reason why people don't act on those things is because of their prior beliefs and conditioning from childhood through school and society and all the media and all of that sort of stuff that shapes our perceptions of how the world is and what's possible. And that's what stops people really going full tilt into what they want to do. But my opinion on that is the very fact that you can even think of and entertain a certain ideal means that it is possible for you to do it. There's a certain sort of threshold, a level of like energy that you feed to something where once you go beyond that, it's like your world changes. And you'll know this has happened because you start to look at the world very differently. And so to give an example of what I mean by this, in the last video I said that I now wanted to take my training and physique to just a completely different level beyond where I'd ever been before. And something really weird has happened lately. Ever since really entertaining that idea and really thinking about it more deeply, I've now been looking at old clips of myself, clips that I've seen thousands of times before, and I had this weird thought, like, you actually thought you were in really good shape then. And it's like, what changed from that? Because I've seen these clips thousands of times before, I've edited with them loads, and I think it's because I was sort of not entertaining a higher desire before, and so I was just kind of okay or fine with where I currently was. It starts to first subtly change your thought patterns, and you start to see the world in a different way. The same world that was there before, but now you view it completely differently. So that's a bit of an explanation about how you take an idea or something you wish to create from its inception point, you start to feed energy to it, and then you'll successfully know if you're doing that correctly if you start to view your world differently, and then what will follow that are the correct actions to get you there. But what most people do, unfortunately, in this position is they do the first part right, because we all naturally desire things. We don't really have to think, oh, I'd like to desire something. They just come about naturally because of our life experiences. We see something we don't like and we use that contrast to set our sights on something we do like. But what most people do is they will initially start to feed it energy, but then they will flip-flop between what they currently see, which isn't that thing, and because the current reality is much stronger, they've lived it for years, that's always going to win out over the new one. It's kind of like that thing with the seed. It's like you don't just plant a seed once, water it, and then forget about it and expect a tree tomorrow. That's kind of like what most people are doing with their desires. They think about them once and then they just go back to living the way they currently are, and they just completely forget about them. And I would say a very unpleasant and quite frankly painful place to be is where you're not choosing either of those things. So you've got the idea to be something better, but you're not quite giving it enough juice, you could say, to actually start to take action on it, or you've got something in your way that's holding you back from really going headlong into it. You're almost in like a place of limbo. It's literally like hell on earth because you don't really move anywhere. You just kind of desiring something, you know you want it, you're not satisfied with where you currently are, but you're not energized and passionate enough to take the action for something, and you just sort of exist in this place of utter dissatisfaction. On this plane of reality we exist in, with the appearance of solidity, things take time to come into manifestation. Like with your physique, for instance, you look in the mirror and you see your current physique every single day, so naturally it's going to be easy to sort of take your cues of how to think and behave from that. But what you must do is you have to think greater than that. You have to look at the ideal of what you want and hold that in your mind more strongly than what you see in the mirror. And this is why it's so hard, and it's very well known in all different industries and endeavors, whether it's music, sports, business, anything. The ones who make it and become the most successful are those who are able to focus so heavily on a vision and just shut out all of the noise, all of these voices telling them that they can't do it, and they just keep going and keep taking one step in front of the other towards that goal. And that's why I said in the last video that this ideal of what you want to be has to be something that you constantly revisit and remind yourself of, because if you don't, it's just not strong enough to start to actually take root. And so the process of creation is supposed to be, you see something dissatisfactory because you need that contrast, seeing what you don't want to know what you actually do want instead. Without one, you wouldn't know what the other is. And then you're supposed to start to feed energy to that in the form of thoughts, beliefs, and start to feel like that person until that becomes strong enough that then you're compelled to take actions to bring it into reality, and it happens. And it's just not enough to simply wish for something. It'll never happen. Now, in that process of choosing what you want to do, there comes an inevitable sacrifice. You can't live a new reality while continuing to be like the old person. The two are mutually exclusive. You open one door and then simultaneously another closes, and they can't be open both at the same time. And that's because the way you're currently being, your current self, has habits and behaviors that are in direct conflict with the birth of that new self, and the two can't coexist together. Now, you can certainly try to live the old way that you were doing, and a lot of people will actually do that, and I think it's just because they're uneducated about this type of process. So they'll want to do something like get a better physique and improve their health and stuff. You certainly have the free will to go and eat shit and not work out, but once you've made that real choice, your world just changes. It's like you can't go back anymore, and if you do try and do those things, you are just not going to feel the same as you used to. And so for me, in wishing to level up my physique and stuff like that, that's opening a door, but the door that has to close on the other side of that is not eating as cleanly, not pushing yourself as much in training. But really, when you have conviction so strong in something and you want something so badly, those things don't even feel like sacrifices, and instead they feel more like liberation. So you've really got to begin playing around with your imagination and just kind of wondering about what you could really be and what you could really have and what you could really do. And I think honestly this is why the majority of the people in the world don't achieve anything outstanding, and I think it's because they're just not really activating their imagination. They're not thinking about what's possible for them, or they're filled with all of these limiting beliefs. And I used to always look at people sometimes and think, like, how are those people able to exist in this unhealthy body or in this career that's unfulfilling but just gets them by? Like, how are they able to withstand that mentally and just do that same thing every single day? If you're not setting those high standards for yourself, then by default you're going to fall to the level of society's standards where you're not really challenged and everyone's just kind of the same and a bit mediocre. So really you could see this as me giving a little bit of a word of caution, because I would say once you bring in that creative energy from the universe or wherever it is, it's like it almost goes into, you could say, a holding station. waiting to be utilized, but it doesn't go away once it's in there. And if you don't utilize it in the correct manner and put it towards productive activities, it is just energetic potential, and it will find ways to outlet itself that are not so productive. And I think this is where people get into things like addictions and stuff. I believe that people that suffer with addictions actually are some of the most high potential people, because they have entertained some of these ideas and things that are possible for them, but for whatever reason they're not able to bring them to fruition, and then they end up trying to just sort of numb out that pain. It's like really they're trying to numb out how great they really could be. But ultimately, you know, this is nothing to be afraid of. Really, it's all working out for our greatest good. It's kind of like the universe, God's way of showing us who we really can be, because we're only able to learn through pain and contrast. And so diamonds are made under pressure. You need that pressure in order to bring the best out of you, you could say. So I think the message of this video is pretty much don't think flippantly about things you want, or don't start to entertain things that you're not willing to show up every day to bring into reality, because if you start to do that, they can really cause your life to go into a bit of a downward spiral, and you can go a little bit crazy. So I hope you enjoyed this one today, guys. Just another sort of stream of consciousness, really, like different things I'm realizing and discovering upon my own journey. And some people might watch this and think that doesn't make any sense, like why is he speaking about this type of stuff? But from what I've come to learn, this stuff is like the real stuff. If you can build conviction so strongly in something, if you can believe in something so much, you won't even have to think about the actions to take. They will literally just happen, and they'll be the right actions, or they'll be at least very close to the right actions. People are always wanting to know how to do things, but they're doing that from a state of non-belief. They don't have the conviction that they're going to be able to do something, and they're trying to band-aid it with tactics, and it's not going to work. Build that conviction, build the belief first, take the time to do it, and you have to nurture it. Like I said, it's like a seed, and the actions will just take care of themselves, and before you know it, you'll be unable to recognize yourself from who you were before.